President Donald Trump expressed his frustration on Twitter after the Fed cut rates by 25 basis points. The president thinks the Fed hasn't gone far enough and is acting too slowly. The cut was, however, the first downward move since the financial crisis, but comes only 7 months after the last of 9 rate hikes. Powell described the easing as a, quote, mid-cycle adjustment in his press conference and added the move wasn't necessarily the start of, quote, a lengthy cutting cycle. That, of course, disappointing the equity markets. And that's why we saw the dollar index rise to a 26-month high. The yield curve flattened and equities sold off. Gold also caught up in the selling as the strengthening greenback took its toll on the precious metal. Joining me around the set today is Marc Ostwald, global strategist and chief economist at ADM ISI. Marc, let's start with the Fed. Of course, that is the big story for markets. I mean, that 25 basis point cut largely priced in by the markets. We know the focus was going to be on the Powell presser. Why was the messaging so unclear?
My general feeling is we've got a situation now where the Fed has a problem in the first place because it didn't actually manage market expectations. It let markets run away with themselves, pricing up to 100 basis points of cuts. Even we had that situation where they were talking about, oh, let's go large the first time, 50 basis points. That's bad expectations management. Now, what Mr. Powell's done on top of all of that is communicate very, very poorly yesterday. At one stage, we weren't sure whether he was trying to tell us that they might be one and done. And they said, well, yeah, it's not a big cycle, but it could be a big cycle. The whole secret to all of this, whatever it takes, and forward guidance, which all the central banks agree is a very powerful tool, is to do it with conviction and enthusiasm. If, as we've seen from the ECB, as we've seen from the BOJ, and now we've seen from the Fed, you start casting doubt on what you're actually doing. Whether it's because you don't actually feel you've got a lot of room to do anything, which I think is the case in all of them, though the Fed has considerably more room than either the ECB or BOJ. Whether it's because they're actually looking at the global economy and saying, well, it's not great, but it's not that bad. It's nothing like we were, say, 7 years ago during the Euro crisis or 11 years ago during the global financial crisis. But this is basically a failure of expectations management. And so I think what we need really here is to start thinking about whether we're going to see a paradigm shift, because all the lessons of financial repression that we've had over the last 10 years have had markets always reacting in exactly the same way. If we're in a situation where central banks are actually really not actually believing they're going to be the saviors of the day, then markets really need to start thinking about whether the big asset bubbles which are being blown are actually justified.